Hey, fantastic. And hello, everyone. My name is Luke O'Malley. I'm one of the founders of Semgrep, and I'm very excited to be joined today by Lee and Rinky, who I'll have introduce themselves in just a moment, for today's talk on the role of AI in security and compliance. Um, some of the topics that we want to talk about today, in addition to AI, security, and compliance, is generally what these things look like in the domain of fintech. And we're going to sprinkle in there as well a little bit on how do you empower your builders? So how do you make the right trade-offs between security teams and security and engineering teams and engineers going quickly to deliver. So welcome again and very, very excited to have everyone. Maybe Rinky, we can start off with you. Do you mind doing a quick intro?
Absolutely. Thanks for having us here, Luke. My name is Rinky. Been in the cybersecurity industry for 21 years. Been a CISO for the last 5 or 6 years. My first CISO role was with Rubrik. Second one was at Twitter during a crazy time. Third one was at Bill, where I was the CISO and CIO, and I've just recently joined a cybersecurity company as CISO there. But worked at Intuit and eBay, PayPal, and many other companies in tech in the Valley here. So excited to have this conversation with you and Lee.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Lee, what about you? What's your background?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm Lee Laszlo. I am the Vice President of Infrastructure and Security at Alloy. Alloy is a fintech that solves identity risk for pretty much any company that offers financial services online. I've spent the last 21 years in software engineering across different industries. I've been in nonprofit, education, media, consulting, most recently startups, including insurtech and fintech. Before my technology career, I served 11 years in the Marine Corps doing completely different things. But in my current role, I oversee product security, corporate security, and cloud infrastructure here at Alloy.
Oh, fantastic. So we've got two heavy hitters with diverse experiences, both separately from each other and then within their own careers. So thank you both for taking the time. Maybe just to kick things off, I have not worked in fintech, and my work experience pales in comparison to yours. I've worked a much shorter amount of time at a much narrower set of companies. So maybe just kick off, what is different about security, and I would say like security engineering in a fintech context compared to maybe non-fintech? We'll start there, and maybe Rinky, you can give us a go first.
Yeah, I always say that regardless of the company you're at, security principles are all the same, but the context is very, very different. So what we're trying to protect at the end of the day might be different, but we're protecting something for our consumers. I think when you think about fintech, it's not just about protecting data. It's about protecting money. It's about protecting identity, ensuring that you're complying to regulations, and trust is everything. When you think about a single vulnerability, that could mean fraud or loss of funds or regulatory exposure. And that's where fintech is very different. And that's where security is very different for fintech, that people's livelihood relies on their financials. And I think the level of consequences shapes how you think about security from day one. When you think about SaaS or media, the blast radius of a breach is usually reputation and data. In fintech, it's livelihood and legality. You're not just shipping security features, you're securing the financial infrastructure that your customers are running their businesses on. And that leads to much tighter alignment between engineering, legal, and security teams than you might find actually anywhere else.
Lee, anything you'd add? Yeah, what's your experience
Yeah,
there?
yeah, I would agree. I think in fintech, unlike other industries where I've worked, security ends up being a part of the product from the outset. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to hire a CISO when you've got 10 or 20 or 30 employees, or even have a dedicated security team. But unlike in, say, a large media organization or higher education, nonprofit, you're absolutely handling tremendous amounts of really sensitive data, PII, financial information, and you're legally obligated to protect that, and contractually obligated to protect it. So it's a different kind of world. Also, I think in especially like a B2B kind of fintech, in order to go to market, you kind of need to listen to and demonstrate to your clients that you're going to be responsible stewards of their data. So um, yeah, you spend a lot more time thinking about security, I think, than you would in other kinds of companies.
Gotcha. So is it your sense that given the environment and the I guess like industry you're in, when it comes to particularly the engineering side of the house, so I think like software engineers, oftentimes when I talk with the teams that we work with, there can be an adversarial relationship between security and engineers. It sounds like in fintech that actually might be a little bit different, given what people know about the industry, given the product, et cetera. Is that actually the case? I'm just curious how that would differ, how that manifests, maybe in your interactions with engineering teams.
I think for me, it's definitely a bit different. There's less of a adversarial kind of relationship. I think that product engineers understand the nature of the thing we're building and the sensitivity of the kinds of data that we're responsible for. And I've definitely seen less of that kind of friction that I have in other organizations.
I think that, a lot of times, like how security, that friction that you talked about between engineering and between security, that might play out if you don't have championship at the top. And so, regardless of organization, whether it's fintech or elsewhere, I think you really need top-down championship. And if the risk tolerance is low at the top, then I think you're going to be able to have stronger relationships and people know that you can't compromise on security. My experience is similar to Lee, that on the fintech side, I think you know what's at stake because you're seeing that what a fraud or even a cybersecurity issue can do to your customers. It's not just data being taken, but there's real money consequences or could be. And so I think that feeling of what you need trust to be like with your customers, you really do feel that in the day in, day out.
Cool. And then I guess kind of naively, you both mentioned obviously there's a compliance and a regulatory component. Just kind of at a high level, I'm curious from a regulation perspective, like what are you subjected to? Because my understanding is, Rinky, as you'd share, like there is a legal component as this of this as well, which may not be present for other industries. Can you just touch on the regulation component, kind of high level for the audience, and how that shapes your day to day?
Yeah, and we have to do SOX and PCI and DSS and GLBA and SEC. And so we kind of fall under many different just requirements. And it's definitely, as a public company, you're balancing all these regulatory requirements that you have to meet. You may not have that scrutiny at other types of companies. You may have much less regulation. And so I think that many times could be the starting of your security program. So it can be good. But I do also think that uh, you want to build and architect solutions for resilience, not just for checkboxes of regulation and compliance. So, and I think that is the sense when you're building a fintech company.
Yeah, I like I worked with a number of teams where they're like, yeah, there's compliance and regulation, we're gonna hit that. That's not the goal. Like our goal is real security, meaningful security that happens to also, meet the requirements elsewhere. I'd be curious, just in the kind of age of AI, so LLMs are, I think, now being widely used. I'm seeing increasing number of CEOs and boards generally communicate to companies, to their companies, hey, we expect you to be using AI to go faster, be more efficient, basically produce a better product, better outcomes, et cetera. Um, how does that intersect in the fintech space and your companies with the kind of compliance and regulatory components? So I'm curious what that interface has looked like. And Lee, maybe I know you've been thinking about this a little bit or exposed to it. Maybe you could just touch on what is it like AI plus compliance and regulation? How is that meeting up with each other?
Yeah, it's a good question, a tough question. We are very much innovators. I mean, a third of our company are engineers, so we are definitely, embracing AI, but we're also being very cautious and I think kind of pragmatic about what we can and should do. So there's a lot of scrutiny, a lot of teams involved, and kind of deciding how we are going to approach this. Like when I say this, I mean like generative AI using tools that everybody's using. Um, but yeah, it's a cautiously optimistic kind of approach.
Okay, cool. And are you seeing that generally regulation is shifting at all because of AI? I'm curious if there's anything new that's developed or come about given this new world.
There's a lot of discussion about rule and model or model and decision explainability
Mm,
that I've heard, not necessarily here, but just in general in fintech. I know that the EU AI Act kind of requires that high risk AI systems be accurate and consistent. And to me, that's like that's really challenging. How do you make sure an AI system is both of those things? Consistency, especially, seems challenging. Um, but yeah, I haven't heard much else. Um, but I think that yeah, we're moving toward a different approach to making security decisions around uh, these kinds of tools.
And Rinky, I know you've been at a number of CISO events lately. What's the chatter? What's the hot goss for AI and regulation?
Yeah, I think like Lee just said, we're all being asked as CISOs that how do you be more productive? Not just CISOs, I think every part of the company is being asked, right? Like, how do you be more productive with less or with the same? And the only way you can do that is starting to leverage AI in meaningful ways within the work that the team is doing. And so I think that's definitely something everybody's talking about. Now, when you think about how you're building in LLMs into the product or consumption of LLMs, I think every company has a different risk tolerance for that. What I've seen in fintech is we've been a little bit more conservative in the fintech space on what we do in terms of build, just because you want to be very careful on how you're training data and how you're training your models and so forth, training on data and training your models. And so I think you've got to be very conscious of that. In terms of consumption, I think people are the ones that have been more open to let's release LLM tools so that people can either use ChatGPT or whatever. They're relying more on detection. I think a
Mm,
lot of the industry is waiting on what can we do from a prevention perspective so that we can kind of open this up. But there's a range, I think, of people talking about we block everything, we don't allow it to like, hey, we're allowing everything and waiting for the industry to evolve around prevention, but relying on detection right now.
well, yeah, it matches up. We were just a week after RSA, and a lot of the conversations I had at RSA with CISOs was like, "Hey, we're under pressure to help accelerate the business," which is like I think generally an argument in case for CISOs and security teams. AI is super promising, but the frameworks for kind of using and thinking about and even like threat modeling these things is still pretty nascent, or it doesn't seem like anyone has really solved it. So I'd be curious to see over the next year how that evolves. Contrast that with the previous year. I know when we first rolled out our kind of AI capabilities, oh my God, legal was it was so difficult to get people to get to a point where they wanted it, but they couldn't turn it on because we hadn't really figured out the legal implications yet. And it does seem that we have at least there's some game tape now, I guess, on like legal teams approving and what they're going to ask for and DPAs and all sorts of things. But it seems we're in the next phase of like people have this and now we need to threat model and secure it. But we're gonna have it and use it. Um, so going back to actually this idea, hey, RSA was last week. I heard a really nice analogy that I want to center kind of the next part of our conversation around, and it was a sports analogy, and it was basically like, hey, in the game of hockey, we can pick whatever game we want to pick, but pick hockey for this example. Great teams are not just defending, right? Like they actually go and they score goals, and the point of a lot of these games is to score goals. So you could have great security by putting all of your players in front of the net, and that might prevent anything from going in. But then you're not actually in a position to go and score. So you're kind of like not fulfilling the spirit of the game. And I like this analogy because I feel like it's often the case for your builders who are trying to go out and kind of put points on the board, create new capabilities, bring new value for your customers, and possibly security, which is trying to prevent the scoring on yourself. I want to talk about this a little bit, particularly in a regulatory environment. And so I'd be curious for both, like, how do you balance what I would call compliance with empowerment? Because you need developers to be able to go quickly, right? I imagine there's a lot of pressure to get new capabilities out, integrate LLMs, et cetera. But there is still this compliance angle. Um, how do you go about balancing, I guess, those two tensions? And then Lee, maybe if you want to kick us off on this one.
Yeah, I think so. So at Alloy, we have a pretty, I think, robust approach to enabling developers. Uh, so I'm very much of the mindset that we should be facilitators from the security side of things, not gatekeepers, not stopping things from happening. So uh, we have practices that we do to allow developers to go fast. Um, Solid dev prod parity to make sure that we're
Mhm.
testing in environments that are just like production, and that includes model training and things like that. Automation in our SDLC, I think that's pretty critical. Um, Clear separation of duties uh, and strong access management controls kind of like help engineers know what they're allowed to do, and they have that freedom. Um, these are all kind of like table stakes, I guess. We also have a pretty strong guild culture here where
Hmm.
um, two guilds in particular I can think of. There's a architecture guild that meets regularly. We've had this for forever, I think. And any kind of new feature that we're building, there's a very open discussion. Security is always there. So there's the ability to interject any kind of security or compliance concerns pretty early in the feature development lifecycle. And then we have a security champions program. We call it the Defenders Guild, which uh, also lets our product security team work pretty closely with other engineering teams, representatives from other engineering teams, and we can kind of convey the risks that we're seeing, yeah, compliance concerns, train folks on threat modeling around emerging technologies like AI. And I think that kind of helps us, yeah, keep developers moving quickly, but in a compliant kind of way.
Let's see. Rinky, what about you? Because I know you've been at many, obviously many different types of companies. Be curious at fintech versus other. Uh, is there de facto tension between engineering's desire to move fast and security and compliance, or is this something you've been able to resolve over the course of your career?
I think there's always a healthy tension around wanting to move fast and produce features for customers, but yet, like, how do you put the right controls in place? And I think that um, regardless of the industry that you're in, um, you always want to be able to have your developers move fast, but make sure you have the right gates in place when needed. I think the more that you can rely on a platform that gives developers self-service access to secure infrastructure, and the more that you can invest in
Mm,
tools that just makes AppSec and everything easy for engineers, rather than getting reports of all these issues, I think the better off it'll be. And I think, like, investing in automated evidence collection so that every action, key rotation, permission change, deployment, everything is logged. I think that's incredibly important. I think Lee said it, that it's so important to have as much automation as you can, such that it's the reliance and the manual efforts on teams is lower, um, and that you can move fast without having tickets or bottlenecks, knowing that you have stringent audit requirements, and then making sure that we're designing systems where everything reinforces each other. I think it's incredibly important. And likely, I think in the past companies I've been at, actually not just in fintech, even outside of fintech, the security champions program, it may be called something different at every company, um, could be highly successful as well, especially if you can train employees and have people that are advocating for security. So they're an extension of the cybersecurity team and helping kind of build that into the DNA and the culture, especially in dev teams.
yeah. I like actually Lee, you mentioned security champions. I like the Defenders Guild name. Like that's a cool name. I feel like I hear security champions a lot, but Defenders Guild it's got a nice ring to it.
Uh,
Um,
it it took us a while to come up with that actually, but we got new stickers just recently. Everybody loves the new logo for that guild.
yeah, it turns out we have a lively sticker culture at the company. Like that is the way. If you want a successful program, you've got to have a cool logo, some good mantras, and some sick stickers. So I love that. Ricky, one of the things that you had touched on that I also really liked is this idea of what I would probably call like paved road or almost like secure guardrails, right? You're saying, hey, like we're going to make it really easy for you to spin up infrastructure. That infrastructure is de facto safe, right? Like we've done the work to make sure that you're kind of getting best practices day one. I'm wondering if there's any more that you two could share on that topic of like, hey, how do you make the safe choice kind of and the right choice the easy one for people? And I feel like you mostly touched on controls, which I hear you on. I think there's training, security champions, all these things are really great. But I love this concept of kind of secure by default, like your building blocks are good. Is there any more that you can say in kind of past experiences or current experience on that topic?
Yeah, I would say like number one is when I think about like application security, infrastructure security back in the day, it was reliant on controls and then reliant on detection. Now there's so many cool vendors and technology where you can just partner right from the get-go. I mean, you have companies that are starting, especially when you think about small startups, you can't have an army of an AppSec team. You have to put this in the hands of your developers. So the more that you can
Mm,
set up secure infrastructure and partner with vendors that are putting this more, I say like if you're going to shift left, you've got to put this more and more in the hands of the developers. I think that's the way to think about it. And that's what I mean by like self-service and making sure that this is security by default. But partner with vendors that are going to help you shift in to the left as well.
shout out to Semgrep. Thank you, Rinky. Lee.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the idea of paved roads and giving developers like the kind of things that they can reuse that we've already verified are secure. Because otherwise it's kind of impossible. You can't have everybody building different things, using different design patterns, and kind of reinventing the security wheel with every new feature. So reusable assets, standardized build and deployment processes,
Mm,
um, proven service discovery, authentication, authorization models that follow zero trust. Those kinds of things I think are essential to scaling an engineering organization that's going to build a secure product, and definitely leveraging vendors that kind of assist with that, especially on the automation side of things and self-service.
yeah, cool. Thank you. This kind of gets into my maybe like the next topic, which is more about like investment in what I would call these kind of proactive, um, maybe proactive things. I'm not quite sure the term, but versus reactive, and also kind of what is maybe allowing you to go more on the offense from a scoring perspective. So we're going to go get goals versus just defend against them. If you both had $100, and I'm going to cap you at $100 to allocate and invest between this maximizing goals versus minimizing being scored on, I'm curious how you would do that, particularly from a security and compliance perspective. Um, what are the things you'd spend the most on, and kind of where would you spend the least? So the goal is again to maximize goals and minimize being scored on. So $100 to invest,
I,
and it's tough. So yeah.
I think it would vary depending on the organization's risk appetite. I think uh, early stage startup, I would probably invest $80 on scoring, $20 on defense, depending on what the kind of startup it is. Um, but as the organization matures, the risk appetite changes. I think that would shift, and I'd end up in a like a maybe a 50-50 kind of split with
Hmm.
$50 on those paved road kind of initiatives and $50 on monitoring, observability, threat intelligence, risk management.
Interesting. Rinky, would you invest differently?
It's a hard question because I do think like the timeline of a company, things do vary because as you start maturing, things are different. But I think if I was to build a company and not thinking from a security mindset, thinking maybe from a CEO mindset, where would I invest security in security? I think it would probably be around like 60 for towards defense and maybe 40 around offense security, if that makes sense. Like I would put 60% and just defend $60, sorry,
Yeah.
in defending. And I think like we have to do things like pen testing and things like that for compliance. So you do have to still make investments in the other side. And I think as you grow and as you mature, that might just even out and the investment might change over time.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say, it's 60/40 or 50/50. Uh, I feel like it's actually shockingly high on offense compared to what I perceive most security programs spending money on. Like my perception from the teams that I talk to is often I feel like they're strictly in defense. Like they're trying to kind of get themselves out from underneath the burden of defense so that they can go and work on these kind of offensive components. Like we talked about the secure guardrails thing. It's like, yeah, actually, we are going to put out the guidance and build the tooling for a particular authentication library or approach, or we're going to roll out maybe kind of secure by default containers because it's their golden images, things like that. Like those types of maybe more proactive things. It seems like teams can never really quite make the time for, and so I'd be curious in your careers, have you seen teams be able to really carve out this proactive time? And I would love to know what the secret is because it seems like it's hard. It's really, really hard.
I do think that you have to I think people are proactive, right? And then something happens, an incident or something, or that makes you kind of change where your focus might be. But you have this idea of long-term projects, like proactive security and kind of building those guardrails and guidelines doesn't happen overnight. It happens over
I
time.
agree. Yep.
Maturity happens over time. And so I think the proactive is what ideally every CISO would be like. I wish I could like containerize myself and have no incidents so I can just build this perfect program, but that's just not how things work in reality. We have to deal with incidents and we have to deal with security issues or even like changing tech landscape. Like AI is the talk of the town, and you have to make sure that you're focusing on the latest and greatest that the company might be adopting. And so those priorities constantly change. But I think in the security mindset, and most of us as leaders are thinking about how to be proactive and build that muscle, and it's usually kind of over a long term, and that's why when you think about identity or identity and access management or even your data security programs, or you think about asset management, which we've been talking about for decades and decades,
Hmm.
you see that it's still focus areas for all CISOs no matter what companies they're at, because these things do take time and things happen, life happens while you're building these programs.
Yeah. Okay. So then I feel like we've talked a little bit then on the proactive side. It's you talked about access and identity management, kind of we talked about golden images and infrastructure training, things like that. On the defensive side, where, for your $50, Lee, I'm kind of curious if we could double click on that. What are the types of things on the defensive side that you are putting money into to prevent those goals from being scored?
Sure. I think strong observability is critical.
Hmm.
So CSPM solutions are very helpful. Um, Building a robust SIM platform and having like great alerting that is actually actionable. So putting money there is important. And basically just aggregating that kind of stuff. Uh, Maybe a bit down the road, threat intelligence is important. If you don't really understand your threat actors and their TTPs, and how you can step into the kill chain to stop an attack,
Hmm.
then really you might just be spending money on things that aren't that relevant. So threat intelligence, I think, is valuable. Having an actual risk management process where you evaluate vulnerabilities that you find or known risks and then weigh them in kind of a analytical way, so that you yeah, again, know where to allocate resources. I think spending money on that kind of thing is important. But yeah, I would start with observability, the pen testing, of course.
Yep.
Uh, yeah, bug bounty program we've recently rolled out. I think that's a pretty helpful thing too.
Ranky, would you change anything there in that answer?
No, I agree actually with everything that Lee said. So spot on. I think that you know, I think at the company at the stage you get in, you kind of even out your investments, and then you're trying to kind of invest really in maturity of the two programs.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Um, so one of the areas that we haven't really talked about is, we've mentioned AI and compliance and regulation and generally teams using it. We haven't talked about AI being used for security yet. And so I want to double click on that. I do think that security tooling and approaches have generally uh, maybe like most valued processes or tools that are deterministic and they're reproducible. And now we're moving towards a world where with LLMs, it's a statistical process. Lee, you had mentioned some of the EU kind of regulation there on for these like high performance systems or critical systems. Can you explain them and can we reason about why certain decisions or outputs were created? Um, I'm so curious, like, are you seeing opportunities to use AI and LLMs in security workflows and to kind of alleviate or automate some of the maybe more mundane, lower leverage activities? And let's start with that, and then I want to jump into kind of how do we think about statistical versus deterministic moving forward? Because I think the world has changed there. So start with the first question: are you seeing LLMs be applied to security use cases? And if so, where and what?
Yeah, I was going to say the areas that I've seen some like really cool applications of LLMs in security has been like third party risk. Um, I mean, talk about mundane work that's like taxing and very people heavy and manually driven. And so I think there's been some extremely exciting developments to like that's applicable right now in reducing kind of you can almost go, I would say like reducing 80% of the workload and just leveraging LLMs and AI to
Hmm.
make that much more efficient and give third party risk folks like, room to do other things in GRC or in other areas of the security program. I think I see promise in security operations too on what LLMs can bring and how you might be able to have even a system where agents start talking to agents and you're able to take care of most of the work and the human could still be in the loop, could kind of oversee what's happening, but actually really like leverage LLMs there as well. So really promising. And I do think like, I've talked about this quite a bit, but I think that security, all of us as security leaders are looking at almost every part of our program that I think is ripe for disruption with LLM. And if we're not, going back to one of the initial things we talked about, I think that people we're being asked like by the board and by everybody on how are you going and driving more productivity, more efficiency with current tools and tech. And so I think it's all ripe for disruption. I think it's exciting. And we know that the attackers are leveraging LLMs in every area of security. So we need to be able to use that as defenders as well.
Well, thank you, Rinky. Lee?
Yeah, I agree with Rinky actually, that especially the third party risk management, I think is ripe for um, yeah, automation and AI. I think is pretty exciting in that regard. I think, yeah, there are lots of opportunities. Otherwise, I've seen managing a data inventory. It used to be a pretty horrible manual process. Just conducting a data inventory and providing that in audits. There are tools out there now that are using AI and machine learning to kind of automate that process. I think that's fabulous. It really reduces a manual burden that I think everybody has had over the years. But I think there are tons of opportunities. Scheduled access reviews, that's a manual thing that I think could be completely handled by AI. I don't know if anybody's doing it yet, but I'd love it if they were. Um, and yeah, of course, vulnerability triage. I think that's perfect use case.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of this. I think what's not clear to me yet is what's the threshold where we trust an LLM to do this work? And I think a little bit the analogy would probably be like autopilot in planes, or for those in a few metropolitan areas, so San Francisco and Austin and whatnot, who have Waymo access. There's no driver. It's performing and driving better than a human. Obviously, they have a lot of miles on their systems and a lot of testing. Uh, what's the I don't know, have you had any discussions on what threshold these systems have to clear in order to be used? So like the third-party risk one is, I think, a great example. It's a lot of human work. I think a lot of it is potentially rote. So like, great, we can just automate this thing away. But you still have to build conviction in the system that the system is doing this as well as a human would, or maybe better. And I haven't seen a lot of discussion yet on like what that threshold is. And frankly, I haven't even discussed this actually that much, even amongst our customers. So curious if you've had any of those conversations and how you're thinking about kind of how good does this have to be to defend the choice to kind of automate.
I don't see it, Luke, as a threshold necessarily.
Okay.
I think we might get there, right? But right now, it's like as we're design partnering and seeing products in our own environments, you like have a human in the loop on everything, right? Because you're starting from a place of like, I don't know if I can trust this thing. And you're going to go through a bunch of these scenarios. And then you're like, oh, okay, I'm seeing this actually works 99 or maybe 100% of the time. We might not need a human in the loop anymore. So
Yep.
I think it's like this phased approach that we're gonna start with human in the loop on everything, and then slowly start trusting and moving away from things. But that's kind of where we're at that stage, that I think most of us are just doing kind of design partnerships and considering this, and we're starting to see results. There's not 100% trust maybe, but I think it'll be built quickly, and then we'll be able to rely more on audits and things like that.
Gotcha. So it's basically there's human in the loop. So it's you don't need a threshold right now. That's not really the conversation because we have a human in the loop. Maybe the question is more, is this useful? Does this feel like it's accelerating the person who's doing the work? And then later on down the road, we can decide, hey, this seems like it's been pretty good. We've built our trust. We'll switch over maybe or change what that human is doing in that loop. Does that summarize
I
the
think,
approach?
yeah, I think so that like then do you even need a human in the loop? Is this like but I think like I guess to answer your question, I think like right now it's like unless it's 100%, like if someone can guarantee 100% accuracy, you're just not going to take away the human in the loop right now. And so I
I
think
know, but
over
that
time, as you start building trust, then you can get to a point where we're there. That's just the reality of it.
yeah. So I mean, I think the analogy holds up then with the self-driving cars because we've had people who have been supervising these systems. They put many, many miles on the system, different metrics, it's like, oh, miles between disengagements or miles between accidents and things. The thing though is like these systems are not perfect. And so that's where I feel like in some way we're moving from a deterministic reproducible world to potentially this greater acceptance of a statistical world where it's like, hey, it's not going to be perfect every time, but we can show that it is better than what we would have done otherwise. And so like then you accept that risk. But that seems like a big can of worms for compliance and regulation and legal and everything else, because that's not, at least my take, that is not how security has historically worked.
Yeah, I think that there will probably be tiers, I guess, and this is kind of similar to what the EU AI regulation does, but I think there will be different tiers of things that we can say, and regulators will say, this kind of decision is okay to be fully AI, but then there are other decisions, maybe ones that have uh, uh,
Lower
critical
consequences
financial,
or
yeah, higher consequences that there would always have to be a human in the loop. But yeah, it's hard to decide whether there'd be some kind of threshold or metric that I would uh, look to and say this is what I'm looking for. I think it's just a question of, like Rinky said, building up um, uh, a trust with whatever the solution is.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the interesting piece is like even if you build up that trust, that the systems do change over time, right? The models change over time. We're seeing even if you're using, OpenAI is like 4.0 under the hood, the model is actually changing, right? So like the results do change over time. You have to keep coming back to benchmarking and whatnot. So yeah, it'll be an interesting world also to see if vendors standardize on how they share this information on benchmarking and everything. Be
Yeah.
curious to see what happens there. Um, so a theme of security is that security is chronically understaffed. There's just far more people who are writing code than security teams to keep up with it. And vibe coding has, of course, changed the game yet again because now you have much more of your organization who is an engineer, right? So we see a lot more sales and marketing, everyone else, which totally clear from my side. I love this change actually. Maybe not for the security implications, but I do think that software engineering needs to be more accessible to more people. I'm curious, has it meaningfully changed your workloads, your day-to-day activities, the threat models that you're working with? And what has it done to your teams, your security teams in particular? So, Lee, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I would say no, not yet. It hasn't,
Okay.
significantly changed anything, but I expect that it will by the end of this year. I think the pace is just such that it's going to have to, yeah, some things are going to have to change. So my security teams are definitely kind of focused on this. I agree with you. I think that having these kinds of tools and democratizing software development is a great thing. More people doing it is good. But yeah, there have to be, of course, checks and balances. Um, there's I think there's an O'Reilly event tomorrow that I'm looking forward to. It's called the end of software development as we know it, and it's yeah, kind of focused on vibe coding and AI.
Yeah. I when I first joined and started the company, I was programming as well. We were programming in Scala, and then thankfully I quickly stopped programming and just focused on product management. But I'm back to coding now, Lee. This is the scary thing, and I love because I can do the full loop of PRD and spec to code to output and then QA it and everything. But yeah, I should not be programming. So, Rinky, I'm curious your experience with this as well.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I don't know if you guys have been following the news. I was just reading some stuff, but it's like I think there's Google and Meta and all these folks are coming. Microsoft are coming out and like figuring out how much code has been generated at the companies with LLMs. Then I think it's like not just changing the way developers work, but shifting. It's going to shift the security surface. And now that you have code being suggested by LLMs and not just code, but like how you do QA and everything, and you're
Mm,
trusting that that may or may not follow best practices. But on the flip side, you also have way faster iteration cycles, um, and that can mask security regressions. And so we've updated our threat models to include like LLM misuse, prompt injection, hallucinated code, libraries. I think it's like this is so powerful and it's going to change the way I think like code is written and how fast, but it's also going to require some new guardrails. And I think we're relying a lot on these co-pilot and vendors that are out there to build some of these security practices into what they provide. But I think we're going to also have to have something on top of that.
yeah. Yeah, it'll be it's a very exciting world out there. I was chatting with someone who they started their career in QA and they moved into software engineering and they were lamenting. They're like, I'm back to QA now because the LLM generates the code and then I check that it does what it says it does. And so they're finding ways to break it. And so they're like, it's just come full circle. Um, Fantastic. Last question, I keep my eye on the time. I'm curious, what is one emerging cybersecurity threat that's keeping you up at night, and how are you preparing for it? We'll end on this question before we turn over to audience questions. So, an emerging cybersecurity threat that's keeping you up at night, and curious how you're preparing for it.
For me, it's I feel like it's always been the same, and it's probably because of some of the incidents that I've had to deal with or help companies deal through, and it's still around identity compromise. And when I say identity, I mean like the big I,
Mm,
including human, non-human, and are we making sure that we don't have an identity compromise in the cloud? And there's and now when you talk about agents and human to I just the permissions and just how you grant privileges and how you grant permissions. I think that continues to be the thing that eats at me. And are we staying on top of things, or do we have the right tech? Do we have the right governance? Are we leveraging tech for this? Do we have the right controls around it? So I don't know, like, I know your question was around emerging threat, but I feel like this has been like, it's just table stakes and continues to be something that I think about.
thank you, Ricky. It's gonna be little sleep this year because that's a big area. So, Lee, what about you?
For me, I also don't think this is an emerging threat, but it's something that I still kind of think about and worry about. It's a third party risk.
Mm,
I think so many SaaS solutions these days are built on just connecting to lots and lots of other third parties or other systems. And yeah, it's just an ongoing challenge. So we have a pretty robust third-party risk management practice. We impose very, very strict controls on how integrations may work and what kind of data may flow between any other parties. But it's a yeah, it's a thing that I think about.
Cool. I appreciate both of your time as well. We'll see if there's any questions that pop up in the chat. But really enjoyed the conversation, and I think for me, just learning more about fintech, also hearing that, despite it being obviously a unique industry, I feel like a lot of the issues and the concerns are the same amongst I would say like fintech leaders and others, with just maybe dialed up to 11, particularly on the compliance front and the regulation legal fronts. Really appreciate, yeah, both your times. Any closing thoughts or reflections from either of you?
Overall, my excitement level is really high in terms of what AI and LLMs are going to bring to cybersecurity. I think it's a amazing time for us to relook at our program. And I think if we start doing that now as security leaders or as security practitioners in each of our areas, I think we're going to be ahead of the curve in a few years. And so I think it's an exciting time. I think my big ask to practitioners is like, look at the innovation that's happening. And even if you don't adopt it, give founders feedback so that they can keep iterating and reinvesting in the ecosystem.
Thanks, Rinky. Lee, anything from you?
Likewise, I'm pretty optimistic and excited about the changes that are coming. And even today, I was meeting with my managers and we were talking about different ways of innovating with, using these kinds of AI tools. And yeah, I'm excited. I know that there's like the flip side of folks who are very pessimistic and worried about what AI is gonna do, but I think that the benefits are gonna outweigh those kinds of risks.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of actually feel like it's, as with most major changes in the world, it's not going back, right? So I feel like you in some ways have to embrace it because it's going to be here. And the question is, how do we wield it responsibly? And I'd much rather be on the forefront of that than maybe denying that point. So we'll see. Yeah, definitely. It is a big, scary world out there with AI, but and actually even on like the offensive security side too, I think this is something where like we have to adopt this technology because our adversaries are adopting the technology. Um, so we'll see how that shakes out over the next year. But thank you again for both your time. Really, really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for everyone who tuned in. We look forward to many more of these. And yeah, Lee, Rinky, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having us. It was an honor.
Cool.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.